How many of you are familiar with this wonderful children's book? Perhaps it still remains on your shelf at home like it does mine even today. I want to share with you one of my favorite quotes. So be sure when you step with care and great tact, and remember that life's a great balancing act. Just never forget to be dexterous and deft, and never mix up your right foot from your left. Great words of advice for adults and children alike. You know, books meant the world to me as a kid. They were my window to the world. They fed my imagination. In fact, I can think of few things more powerful than a book. You know, where did my love of reading come from? Well, like many of you, that timeless tradition, perhaps, of parents reading to their children as they go to bed at night, a tradition that I maintain with my adorable 5-year-old daughter, Julia, sitting here in my lap, no matter where I find myself in the world. But I'd like you to just think for a moment and pause. Can you imagine if you could not read or write? There'd be no Google, there'd be no Kindles, not those 140-character tweets, not that addictive Facebook, but seriously, not even a newspaper, not a book, not a medicine bottle. Imagine going to school and having no school library. Imagine trying to learn math without being able to access a textbook. Imagine how you would interact with the world if you could not read or write. And yet I'm here today to tell you that unfortunately that's the reality for millions of children around the world. So what is the challenge? Well, 759 million people cannot read or write. Let me just repeat that. 759 million people around the world cannot read or write. 98% of them live in the developing world. 2/3 are girls and women, which means that illiteracy impacts some of the most at-risk population already. And you know what? We are never going to change those statistics. We are going to never end this cycle of poverty if we don't ensure that millions of children have access to higher quality educational opportunities in their communities that's meaningful and relevant to them. So that's what I'm here to talk about today, my passion of how I scaled an organization to tackle a massive problem. And I want to share with you 5 lessons today that I've learned along this journey of scaling social good. And the first one really starts with how did I develop my passion and discover it for this idea. You know, I need to take you back to the mid-90s to tell a little bit of my personal story. I started out my career at Goldman Sachs in investment banking. It's a little bit of a better job then than it is now. And I left Goldman to join Unilever in Vietnam to start up their business. You know, in those days, Vietnam had just opened up to foreign direct investment. It was kind of like the wild, wild west. It was a really exciting and exhilarating time. And I had an amazing experience living there for 3 years, building their business. But it really profoundly changed me and my mindset in another way that I didn't expect. I began to realize that education is absolutely the great leveler. It is a key determinant in terms of pulling yourself out of poverty. And so what I really became passionate about was the community service jobs that I was able to help Unilever with. And some of those were building schools and communities. And I realized what I loved and what I was passionate about was empowering communities through education. And if you think about it, no matter what the issue is, increasing economic prosperity, better health care, solving complex environmental problems, enhancing political participation and empowerment, at the root of everything, the key is to developing solutions is an educated population. And so when I came back from Vietnam, I met John Wood, who had started a project in Nepal called Books for Nepal. And we teamed up, combined our ideas, and we launched Room to Read. And we took it to scale. It became the next chapter of my life, of what I became passionate about. And it was a very simple idea. We started by partnering with schools to establish libraries. We went and made sure we printed books in the local languages for children. We worked with teachers so that they had the skills to ensure that there was a print-rich, child-friendly, literate environment. And we ensured that more girls stayed in school because they were the most at risk for dropping out of school. This is a picture of me of a full circle moment when I went back to one of the schools that I built with Unilever and delivered the first set of books for Room to Read. And that was it. I said, this is what I want to do. I want to help educate the world's children. And this is a picture in one of our first schools that we started working in Vietnam that still motivates me today. I mean, what more optimistic image can you imagine in the world than these happy kids going to school, knowing that they're going to reach their full potential in life through the power of education? You know, at Room to Read, we remain action-oriented optimists, just like we were in our early days. I think Nelson Mandela actually said it best. Education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. And that's what we did at Room to Read. We took our ideas and our determination in the early days, and with the motto, world change starts with education, we went and we scaled. And that's my lesson number 2, is how do you turn that idea into a reality? You know, first and foremost for us, it was about surrounding ourselves with powerful leaders in the countries that we wanted to work in. You know, from my experiences working before in the for-profit world, I realized that expatriate leadership, foreign leadership, had its limitations, and higher impact and more sustainable was powerful local leadership. And the people who came to us had their own amazing, wonderful life stories that they brought. Stories like that of Kong Kal in Cambodia, who lost almost his entire family to the genocide of the Khmer Rouge, where 1/5 of the population of Cambodia was massacred by their own government. Almost all the books in the country were burned, and schools were used as killing fields. Kal grew up on the streets of Cambodia, fending for himself, sneaking into school to get an education. And now he's a country director for Room to Read that oversees our operation of more than 40 staff delivering high-quality educational programs that are helping to rebuild the education system in Cambodia. You know, stories of Sunisha Ahuja in India, who is our country director for Room to Read India. She is a woman who's bucking the stereotypes of what a woman should be. She's a country director for our largest operation in India. I've had the pleasure of sitting on the ground with Sunisha in many villages, talking with all the male elders of the community, convincing them of the importance of our girls' education program. And Kal and Sunisha have a really tough job. They have to go hire the best and the best in their countries in order to deliver our programs. Zambians running Zambia, Sri Lankans running Sri Lanka. And that brings me to lesson number 3, that it really hasn't been that easy scaling Room to Read for the last 10 years. And we've had to learn from setbacks and take risks. And some of those risks have been about being an outsider rather than an insider. We were for-profit people in the nonprofit world. We were tech and operations people in the education sector. We were Americans in Vietnam, South Africa, and so on. But you know what? It's the great thing about being an outsider is it's very freeing. You don't know what the shoulds are. You don't know what you should be doing. You just go out there and you just do it and make change happen. In many ways, I think of it as the Buddhists do, of having a beginner's mind, a fresh, unbiased approach to problem solving. Isn't that a beautiful concept? A fresh, unbiased approach to problem solving. And that's what we did. I remember the story of when we started Room to Read Laos in 2005, our 5th country. I've been in the country for weeks getting all the licenses, and I needed one more license from the Minister of Finance, and I couldn't get an appointment. So I decided to just boldly walk over to the Minister of Finance and just walk in the doors and with confidence get funneled through all the bureaucracy until I ended up in his office. And he was the first person to ask me, "Do you have an appointment?" And that just sort of shows how sometimes you have to break all the protocol and you have to take risks to just get it done. Now we are one of the top NGOs operating in Laos, in a country, a communist country that has a small NGO presence. Another risk on maybe a bigger organizational scale is when we launched our local language publishing program. You know, the challenge in the developing world that we heard from the schools that we were working with in the early days in Nepal when it did our monitoring evaluation studies is that what they really wanted was more books in the local language. Yet we went to the market and we couldn't find any to buy. So this is a conundrum. We said, what can we do? The issue is that in a developing world where families live on $1 or $2, and that's the same price of a book, they're luxury items. And we got all these wonderful English book donations, but you know what? Barbie doesn't really make a whole lot of sense in Cambodia, and Dora the Explorer doesn't help the kids of Nepal. So we really had to understand, how could we go out and create relevant, culturally sensitive books? And luckily, when we approached Dinesh, our country director, first country director for Nepal, and our other co-founder, he said, we can make this happen. You find me the money and we'll make it happen. And that's exactly what we've done. And now 8 years later, we have published 553 original titles in 23 languages, and we've distributed 5.7 million books. 5.7 million books. But you know what's even more exciting? Is that we're also building the local capacity of the authors and the illustrators that we work with through our workshops, so that we're building a sustainable program and a sustainable children's book industry. And these books that they're coming up with are amazing, like The Amazing World, which is a wonderful book that comes out of India that teaches children about the geographies of India through talking turbans. And the great part is that these books are popular among their children, and that's wonderful. But the other wonderful part is that we are all also now winning awards, like this book called While Swinging that won the 2009 Best Children's Book Award in Nepal. It's a simple book written with short verses about a girl who falls off her swing, but undeterred and with resolve, she gets back on the swing and learns to swing again, a little bit more carefully this time. You know what I love more than anything is talking to children in our libraries. They ask me the most amazing questions. In Nepal, a landlocked state, they asked, what does the ocean taste like? In Cambodia, a very hot country, they asked, what does the snow feel like? You know, this is great minds at work. Learning and exploring the world through books. There's nothing better. Certainly the best part of my job is being able to get off the beaten path and get to visit some of Room to Read's libraries. But if you fast forward this story 10 years ahead, we have now established 11,000 libraries. Thank you. You know, that is more Starbucks and Starbucks has set up. That's more McDonald's, and we've outpaced them. And you know what? If the world needs more Starbucks and McDonald's, the world certainly needs more school libraries. So we are really excited about that. So that brings me to lesson number 4. You have this idea. You're able to turn it into reality. You got to take it to scale. You got to have the greatest impact you can ever have. And that's what we tried to do at Room to Read. We've already impacted lives of 5 million children with our educational programs. We're launching our 10th country this year, Tanzania. We've raised to date and deployed $150 million to the cause of educating children. And you know, one of the best ways that we've been able to take it to scale is in our fundraising efforts. We have volunteer chapters in over 53 cities around the world that raise money for Room to Read, all volunteers. Last year, they raised a third of our annual operating budget. That's more than $12 million. And the great part is that these chapters are just not in the US. More than half of them are outside of the US, which allowed us to raise 45% of our funds outside of the US. It's just incredible. We're creating a global movement around the importance of educating children. When I was just in Zambia a couple of weeks ago, and I heard another story which just talks about taking it to scale, which is really encouraging that local initiative from our country teams. You know, the Zambia team approached Zambeef Company, which is a beef company that comes into Lusaka, the capital of Zambia, with beef. But all their trucks go out to the rural areas practically empty. So our team said, why can't you deliver our furniture to our rural libraries for us? Which Zambeef did at no cost, on time, and with no damage. This is just a great way of developing those local partnerships that can make us more effective and more efficient. This is how a library gets delivered in the Chor district, remote areas of Bangladesh, on the back of a bicycle. We are always looking for those local initiatives to support. And that brings me to my final lesson, lesson 5, which is remaining open to refining the vision. You know, I've always really tried to instill and encourage at Room to Read this idea of being a learning organization, of making sure that we're always listening to the ideas that bubble up and being able to implement them and refine our vision. You know, we started our girls' education program in 2000. It was really a material support program for our girls on scholarship. And we often gave them goods that were heavily Room to Read branded, like these incredibly oversized backpacks for these adorably small girls in Nepal. And what we realized is that this really ostracized and singled out the girls, which of course was not our intention. What we wanted to do was really work with all the girls, and that's how we've refined the program, is working with more girls in the schools, and also more of the stakeholders around the girls, their parents, their teachers, even the boys, so that everybody understands the importance of education and why it matters so much that girls stay in school. And now we're providing extracurricular life skills workshops after school to empower girls even more, to use their voice. And we're giving them mentors, role models in their own communities. And now the program is about keeping girls in school longer, but also helping them to navigate these very difficult life decisions that they have to make. You know, nothing is more important than celebrating sometimes the successes of the impact that we are having that helps drive us forward. Stories like that come from our girls' education program, touch the heart, like that of Na here in the orange shirt. Na comes from a very rural community in the Mekong Delta. She has 5 brothers and sisters, and their family live on less than $1 a day. She's the first person in her family ever to make it to graduate high school, which is a phenomenal achievement in and of itself. But she didn't stop there. She went on and she got a scholarship from the Vietnamese government to go to the Long Am Provincial University and to study law so that she could fight for the rights of agricultural workers back in her village. And I am just so proud that we were able to help support her in her education, because she's going to be an outstanding member of her community that's going to create world change right where she needs to see it the most, in her own village. We're also refining the work that we're doing in literacy. What we learned in the early days is that setting up libraries and printing local language books was wonderful, but oftentimes they went underutilized because the children couldn't read well enough in the schools to make use of them. And so now we've started to partner with teachers and redefine quality education in the classroom. And what that's meant is that we've had to start to help improve how reading and writing is taught. We had now produced materials, workbooks, and we work with teachers on professional development training so that they know how to teach reading and writing better. So it's all about ensuring kids have the skills to read as well as develop the regular habit so that they have a solid foundation in literacy and become lifelong learners, which is what the ultimate goal is. So as I wind down this presentation, I want to just share one last aha moment that I had recently. I took my daughter to work with me last summer by visiting Room to Read's projects in Asia. And it was an incredible experience to see Room to Read through her eyes. And after visiting several projects, several libraries in the Mekong Delta, Vietnam, I asked Julia, what was your favorite experience? And she said, Mom, it was when we walked into that library and we saw that little boy reading to his stuffed animals. That's exactly what I do. Libraries over here are just the same. And I thought, yes, we've achieved something. From San Francisco to Vietnam, we've been able to provide similar opportunities for children to access high-quality educational in their own communities, which will empower them to make wonderful life decisions and turn their dreams into reality. And you know what? That's the good news. We know how to educate the world's children. We just all need to get together, to get out there, to do more of it, more effectively, more cost-efficiently, and at even greater scale. But this is a battle we need to win. In our lifetime, we have the power to eradicate illiteracy. In our lifetime, we know how to do it. And I want nothing more in the world than for my daughter to grow up to turn her dreams into reality. But for every child in the world, no matter where they are born or what circumstances they are born into, to have that same opportunity. It is a basic human right. And I hope that all of us care enough to help make that happen. So with that, I end with one final Dr. Seuss phrase, which I hope motivates you to think about what you're passionate about and how you want to create positive world change in the world. And as the wise Dr. Seuss said, unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. Thank you.
Thank you, Erin. Thank you so much.